He leaned in, smiled, and whispered, "It's laced. Say your goodbyes." But what he didn't know was that I'd already switched the glasses. And as he collapsed, I whispered back, "You deceived me in love. Now drink to your end." If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, or dreamed of the perfect moment where justice is served with a smile, hit subscribe, tap that like button, and comment if you've ever wanted someone to truly get what they deserve. This story will prove. Sometimes, silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of a trap closing. He didn't know I'd switched the glasses. The vintage Bordeaux was a deep burgundy, almost black in the candlelight, swirling silently as I lifted the crystal flute to my lips. I didn't drink, yet. Not until he did first. Across the table, Dorian smiled. That perfect, photo-ready grin. He always knew how to charm a room, even now, with murder on his breath. "To 5 unforgettable years," he said smoothly, raising his glass. I mirrored him with equal elegance. "Unforgettable," I echoed. And then we drank. It began with a tremor, barely perceptible, a small twitch in his left hand as he set his glass down. The poison wouldn't work instantly, of course. That would be suspicious. No, it was subtle. Just like him. For a moment, the old Celine, the one who had once loved this man, hesitated. But only for a moment. I reminded myself, this wasn't our first anniversary dinner. It was his last. How did it come to this? It started 5 years ago. Back when I still believed in forever. Back when I didn't know that Dorian Moreau, my brilliant, sophisticated, impossibly perfect husband, had a habit of marrying women like me. Women with wealth. Women with trust. Women with wills rewritten just before their mysterious deaths. I was going to be number 4. But I found the drawer. It was a rainy Wednesday when I stumbled upon the false bottom in his antique writing desk. He had left for another business trip to Prague, and I had decided to tidy up his study. I didn't expect to find anything. Dorian was always meticulous. But that day, the corner of a manila folder caught on the edge of the drawer and refused to slide shut. Curious, I opened it. Behind the false panel was a leather folio. Burgundy. Luxurious. Inside were papers, photographs, and a USB drive. And with every page I turned, I felt my entire marriage decay beneath my fingertips. 3 names. 3 women. 3 carefully documented love stories. I studied their faces, beautiful, hopeful. Their smiles wore the same easy trust one once had. Wedding photos. Honeymoon shots. Medical records. Wills. Death certificates. Charlotte from Copenhagen. Lydia from Dublin. Margot from Marseille. Gone. All of them. With everything left behind to him. A wave of nausea crashed through me as realization bloomed in my stomach like venom. I was next. But Dorian didn't count on me discovering the file. Or tracking down the private investigator. Or building immunity, day by day, to the exact substance he planned to use. He had spent years perfecting his plan. I would spend 6 months perfecting mine. And now here we were. Table 14 at Aubert's Lumière, the very same place where he had proposed 5 years earlier. Crystal chandeliers glittered above us, casting golden light across Dorian's silver tie and my black silk dress. It had been his idea, of course. The wine, the setting, even the dress. He always liked to choreograph the stage before the final act. But the ending, this time, would be mine. "Do you remember our first night here?" he asked, swirling the wine in his glass. "Of course," I replied smoothly. "You wore that blue dress with the scalloped neckline." He smiled. "You were nervous. You didn't know which fork to use. And you ordered oysters, I added. You hated oysters. He laughed. I still do. He reached across the table, placing his hand over mine. But I loved how hard you tried to impress me. You've always had the kindest heart, Celine. So trusting. So generous. His voice was smooth as velvet, but I heard the steel beneath it now. 5 years ago, I would have melted under his touch. Now I only felt ice. You look stunning tonight, he said. The necklace suits you. The necklace. Pearls. A gift from him last month. Likely meant to be my last. I leaned forward slightly, the way he liked. You always know how to make a woman feel special. His smile broadened, and for a moment, I could see the pride in his eyes. Not love, never love, but the thrill of manipulation. The enjoyment of having control. That was Dorian's true addiction. He tapped his glass lightly against mine. To us. To us, I whispered. I watched him drink again. A deeper sip this time. The waiter arrived with our first course, beef tartare with black garlic foam and a quenelle of crème fraîche. Dorian had pre-ordered it all, of course. I watched his fingers tremble as he picked up his fork. Is everything all right? I asked sweetly. He blinked once, twice. Fine. Just lightheaded, maybe. This wine is strong. I offered a concerned smile, the kind I'd practiced in the mirror. Perhaps you're tired. You've been working so hard lately. He nodded, but I could see the confusion beginning to bloom behind his eyes. That's the thing about carefully planned poison. It doesn't rush. It unspools. Slow. Elegant. Just like him. And just like me. I raised my own glass again, took a sip, harmless, since I'd prepared both glasses but switched them at the last moment. He thought he'd win tonight. But I had rewritten the ending. He placed his hand on the table, fingers splayed. Celine. Yes, love. He blinked again. You switched the glasses. I tilted my head, letting silence hang between us. Then I leaned in close and whispered. You deceived me in love, Dorian. Now drink to your end. He stared at me, horror dawning in slow motion. His lips trembled as he tried to form words. But there was nothing left to say. The game was over. Rain had been falling since morning, thin, steady, and cold. The kind of rain that draped the city of Valmont in a film of gray, hiding secrets in the glimmer of wet cobblestones. I had just returned from the bakery, arms full of pastries Dorian would never eat, when I stepped into his study for the first time in months. The air inside was still. Precise. Like a museum exhibit frozen in time. Every book on the mahogany shelves stood perfectly aligned. His desk, an antique Victorian with brass lion's feet, sat beneath the tall window that framed the dripping vines outside. It was a place meant to impress. To intimidate. A room for closing deals and opening traps. He never let me clean in there. I told myself I was just dusting. That was a lie. A part of me already knew something wasn't right. We'd been married 5 years, and Dorian had taken 5 solo business trips in the last 6 weeks. He blamed it on expansion, his property firm was growing, and he needed to manage clients personally, he said. But I'd started noticing inconsistencies. Small things. A charge on a hotel in Milan when he claimed to be in Oslo. A tan line on his ring finger despite cloudy weather in Amsterdam. My tea tasting bitter. Then, the dreams started. Or maybe memories, half-truths stitched together in the quiet of early morning. Whispers about his past. Stories he told that never quite matched up. I reached for the duster and began with the desk. The top drawers were empty. Too empty. Sterile. Like they'd been arranged for show. But the bottom left drawer jammed when I tried to close it again. That's when I saw it, a sliver of leather sticking up from the back, barely visible. My pulse quickened. I pulled gently. The entire panel slid forward with a click. Behind it was a slim compartment I'd never known existed. My hand trembled as I pulled out the leather folder, thick, worn, and sealed with a brass clasp. It felt heavy. Important. Dangerous. I opened it on the desk, heart pounding against my ribs. The first thing I saw was a wedding photo. But it wasn't ours. A young woman in a lace dress stood beside Dorian, smiling up at him. He looked younger, leaner. But it was him. No doubt. The next photo showed another woman, red-haired, laughing, holding Dorian's hand as they walked along a canal. The third was black and white, staged like a formal portrait. Dorian again. Another woman. Another ring. All three women looked like me. Dark-haired. Graceful. Confident. The kind of woman who would write her husband into her will. Each photo was clipped to a packet of documents, marriage certificates, financial records, real estate transactions. And death certificates. Charlotte. Lydia. Margot. Copenhagen. Dublin. Marseille. Each married within 2 years of meeting him. Each dead before the 3rd anniversary. Causes of death: heart failure, carbon monoxide poisoning, accidental overdose. Each estate transferred cleanly to Dorian Moreau. I couldn't breathe. I flipped to the last packet. Celine Moreau. My name. My passport. My will. A revised life insurance policy. A notarized letter I didn't remember signing. I stumbled back from the desk, hands trembling. My knees hit the edge of the leather chair, and I collapsed into it, gasping for air. I was going to die. That was the moment Celine died, Celine the wife, the dreamer, the woman who believed in love. And someone else was born in her place. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I studied. I memorized. And I planned. That night, when Dorian called from Berlin, or so he claimed, I answered with a smile. "How's the weather?" I asked, cheerful. "Misty. Cold. You'd hate it." He had no idea. "I miss you," I said. "I'll be home in 2 days. We'll celebrate properly." "Oh, I can't wait," I whispered. "I've been thinking about that wine we saved." He laughed. "Exactly what I was thinking. Let's open it next Friday. Our anniversary." I smiled. "Yes. Let's." When the call ended, I stared at the drawer again. Then I went to my own safe in the dressing room, pulled out my notebook, and began a new chapter. Date. Time. What I found. Then I locked the folder inside my own vault, beneath a false bottom Dorian didn't know about. For the next 6 months, I lived 2 lives. By day, I was his wife, the perfect hostess, the charming designer, the woman in tailored dresses and pearl earrings. By night, I became his mirror. I traced his steps. I copied his files. I hired a private investigator under my maiden name. I learned about poisons. Slow ones. Undetectable ones. Elegant ones. I mapped out his trips and found the same patterns he used on the others: 3 months of subtle poisoning, staged health complaints, the push to update the will. He'd even started preparing my symptoms with emails to my doctor. The man was rehearsing a death. But not his own. Not yet. Every night I brewed the tea he'd prepared. Every night I poured it down the drain. And every morning, I smiled brighter. He watched me. Measured me. And I let him believe I was fading. "You look tired," he'd say softly, brushing a hand over my cheek. "Are you sleeping?" I'd nod, eyes glassy. "Just a little run down, that's all." And he would kiss my forehead like a man who already owned the funeral plot. "But the joke, Dorian, was on you. Because I wasn't your fourth. I was your finale." Revenge, like gardening, is an act of patience. You don't rush the roots. You choose the soil carefully. You water it day by day. You let it grow slowly, quietly, until one day, it blooms, and no one sees the danger until it's too late. That's why I started the garden. I told Dorian it was for therapy, something to calm my nerves as my mysterious symptoms worsened. He encouraged it, of course. Another step in his narrative of the fragile, fading wife. He even bought me gardening gloves with embroidered lilies and a vintage wheelbarrow for my birthday. I thanked him, kissed his cheek, and smiled sweetly. He had no idea the lilies were not ornamental. They were functional. Each flower I planted had purpose. Some were toxic. Some were medicinal. Some, like oleander and foxglove, were both. It was all about the dose. I found Eleanor Leclerc through an online horticulture forum. A retired botanist with a greenhouse on the edge of Valmont, she was kind and talkative. Exactly what I needed. I visited her every Thursday, always with a fresh loaf of bread or local honey. She thought I was writing a blog on herbal teas. She loved that. She never once asked why I took such detailed notes. "Nature gives us everything," she told me once, as we trimmed monkshood blossoms together. Healing, poison, even truth. The trick is knowing which root to pull. I took her words to heart. At home, the back corner of our estate became a hidden lab. Raised beds lined with tall hedges. Sunlight filtered through just enough to keep everything alive, but not visible. I kept a journal, meticulous, coded. March 5th, 4 drops of aconite extract caused nausea within 17 minutes. March 19th, test dosage on meat sample, paralysis onset at 28 minutes. April 2nd, build tolerance to belladonna, start with half measure in tea. At night, I rehearsed scenarios. What if he changed the wine at the last minute? What if he didn't drink first? What if he suspected? Dorian was cunning. He didn't make mistakes often. But arrogance makes men careless. And I'd learned to play the long game. As I walked the garden paths each morning, I rehearsed my lines, my expressions, my timing. I built immunity to the toxins slowly, painfully, enduring the tremors, the nausea, the racing heart. Symptoms I allowed him to see. Symptoms that convinced him his plan was working. "You're fading, darling," he whispered one night, stroking my hair as I lay in bed, trembling from a self-inflicted dose of wolfsbane. "I know," I murmured. "But as long as you're here." He kissed my forehead, satisfied. He never noticed the syringe beneath the mattress. Or the gloves in the compost bin. Or the burn marks on my inner arm from a too concentrated extraction. Each bruise was a promise. Each drop was a declaration. By May, I had enough material to kill 3 men, and enough immunity to survive any wine toast he could design. Sandra, my investigator, had kept quiet. She discovered that Lydia's autopsy was rushed. That Margot's accident involved an insurance payout pushed through by a lawyer who vanished the next week. That Charlotte's family had questions, until a mysterious donation appeared in their bank account. Dorian was precise. But he wasn't perfect. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Sandra asked me over tea one afternoon. I'm already going through it, I replied. I just want to finish it standing. Celine, she said softly, this man is dangerous. I looked her in the eye. So am I. Back at home, Dorian surprised me with reservations at Aubert's Lumière. For our anniversary, he said, beaming. 5 years, can you believe it? I can, I said. It's been unforgettable. He smiled, pleased. He thought it was his night. I marked the calendar in my garden journal. June 10th, the toast. From that day on, everything moved in precision. I selected the wine, an 89 Bordeaux he'd been saving. I arranged the seating. I polished the crystal glasses myself. I even picked my dress, black silk, matching the necklace he gave me. The same necklace Margot wore in her last known photo. He would think it symbolic. He would think it poetic. He had no idea the poetry was mine. In the days leading up to our anniversary, I played the doting wife. I fainted once in the hallway, an Oscar-worthy fall. I claimed dizziness. He logged it into his medical concern file. I let him prepare my tea each night, sipping just enough for him to feel in control. You're so brave, he said one night, tucking me in. You're so good to me, I whispered. He kissed my hand, lingering. If he had even a sliver of suspicion, he buried it beneath his ego. That's the thing about predators. They think they're invincible. Until they're not. The night before the dinner, I stood in my garden beneath a crescent moon, brushing my fingers over the foxglove petals. The wind whispered through the hedges. I closed my eyes and whispered to the ghosts of Charlotte, Lydia, and Margot. Tomorrow, I said. And I meant it. The sun had just begun to set when I stepped out of the black car in front of Aubert's Lumière. The soft clinking of silverware echoed through the restaurant's tall windows, and golden chandeliers flickered above tables dressed in white linen. It was a scene straight from a love story. Only this one would end in death. I arrived early, by design. Dorian loved control, but he also loved grand entrances. I knew he'd arrive precisely on time. That gave me 20 minutes to stage the final scene. The maitre d', Antoine, recognized me instantly. Madame Moreau, he said with a gracious bow, your table is ready. Mr. Moreau called ahead to ensure every detail was perfect. I bet he did. Antoine led me to a corner table, secluded, intimate, candlelit. Table 12. The same table where Dorian had proposed 5 years ago. The same table where he planned to kill me tonight. Poetic, in his own way. The wine was already waiting, a 1989 Chateau Margaux, the one we'd bought together during our honeymoon in Bordeaux. It had been resting in our cellar ever since. He'd insisted on saving it for a truly special night. And now, here it was. The wine. The moment. The setup. I reached into my clutch, fingers brushing over the small, frosted vial I'd placed inside earlier. The liquid inside shimmered faintly, nearly invisible in the low light. A combination of 2 agents, one to mimic cardiac failure, the other to disguise the cause. Both extracted from the very flowers blooming in my garden. With the sommelier's back turned, I made the switch. It took only seconds. Dorian's glass would receive a single drop. Mine, untouched. When the waiter returned, I smiled warmly. The wine, please. He'll want to pour it himself. Of course, madam. Everything was ready. 10 minutes later, Dorian arrived. Sharp as always. Slate gray suit. Silver cufflinks. The heirloom watch he said belonged to his grandfather, a detail I now questioned. He kissed my cheek, inhaled the scent of my perfume. You smell exquisite, he whispered. Like the night we met. You always remember the small things, I replied. I never forget what matters. Liar. He pulled out my chair, sat across from me, and scanned the table approvingly. His gaze lingered on the wine bottle. I can't believe you found the Margot, he said. You said it was for something special. This is the perfect occasion. His hands were steady as he uncorked the bottle with practiced ease. The candlelight flickered, casting golden halos in the deep red of the wine as he poured. First, his glass. Then mine. He didn't notice the change in weight. The stemware looked identical. But I knew which was which. To 5 unforgettable years, he said, raising his glass. I lifted mine. Unforgettable. We drank. He watched me as I set the glass down, his eyes full of warmth. Or maybe calculation. With Dorian, it was hard to tell. Dinner began with amuse-bouches, tiny, artful bites curated by the chef. Dorian ordered for both of us, naturally. Seared scallops for him. A fennel consommé for me. You haven't been eating much lately, he said, cutting into his appetizer. Is everything all right? I nodded. Just tired. I think I need to rest more. He reached across the table and took my hand. Don't worry, darling. Soon, you'll be completely at peace. His eyes lingered on mine. There was something different in his gaze tonight. Not tenderness, certainty. He truly believed tonight would be the end of me. That his plan, flawless and fatal, was unfolding just as intended. The thought almost made me laugh. Tell me again about the first time you saw me, I asked, drawing him back into his own script. He chuckled. You were at the art gallery. Alone. Staring at that enormous painting of the sea. I thought you looked like a storm was living inside you. And you said, I'd like to be the calm in your chaos. Still one of the smoothest lines I've ever heard. He smirked. It worked, didn't it? I smiled. For a time. The waiter returned with the main course. Dorian had chosen Wagyu steak for himself, lemon herb chicken for me. He carved his meat with precision, then paused to watch me take a bite. You barely touched your starter, he noted. Is everything okay? I nodded faintly. Just a little dizzy. Want to go home? Not yet. He smiled, the picture of concern. To anyone watching, we were the perfect couple, still in love after 5 years, still devoted. Still sharing glances over candlelight. He checked his watch. 3rd time. He was tracking the dosage. It should hit any minute now. I reached for my wine and took another small sip. He mirrored me, drinking deeper. How's the flavor? I asked. Complex. Robust. He tilted his head, swirled the glass. Hints of blackberry. Leather. Old oak. Isn't it fascinating, I said softly, how something so beautiful can hide something so dangerous? He looked up. I held his gaze. The first flicker came then. Just a shift in his posture. He placed a hand on his stomach. His brow furrowed. Something wrong? I asked. He blinked. Just, lightheaded. Probably the wine. Maybe you're more sensitive than you thought. Another few minutes passed. He pushed his plate away. The tremor in his left hand returned. Celine. Yes. His throat worked as he swallowed. He reached for his water, missed the glass, knocked it over. Ice clattered across the table. Dorian. His face paled. What did you? I leaned forward, voice low. You chose the wine. You chose the table. You even chose the dress. But you didn't choose the ending. Realization burst in his eyes like a flare. You switched the glasses. I tilted my head. I switched them back. He struggled to speak, but the muscles in his jaw were tightening. All around us, diners clinked glasses and shared laughter. A birthday was being sung in French 2 tables away. Waiters weaved between tables with plates of foie gras and roasted duck. No one noticed as my husband began to die. You monster, he croaked. I smiled. No, darling. I was your student. You just didn't think I'd surpass the teacher. He tried to rise. His legs wobbled beneath him. The waiter approached, concern on his face. Monsieur. Are you all right? I think the wine was a bit much, I said calmly. Could you help me get him to the car? Of course, madam. I stood, walked beside them as they carried Dorian between the tables. He clung to consciousness, struggling to speak. I leaned in as we reached the door. Happy anniversary, my love. He stared at me, betrayed. And I smiled. Because he had no idea what was waiting for him in the car. The car door closed with a solid, echoing thud. Outside, the night air was crisp, perfumed with blooming acacia and the faint scent of ocean salt. The valet had helped Dorian into the passenger seat, unaware of the shaking that coursed beneath his tailored suit. He assumed it was too much wine. Maybe low blood sugar. Certainly not death. Take care, madam, the valet said as I slipped him a tip. Always, I replied. And then I drove. We didn't head home. We took the scenic route, the one that wound along the cliffs overlooking Valmont Bay. The road was nearly deserted at this hour, lit only by scattered street lamps and the distant glow of the harbor. The sea sparkled to our right, restless and black. Just like him. Dorian sat silent beside me, breathing unevenly, head pressed against the leather headrest. The color had drained from his face. Sweat pooled at his collarbone. His once pristine cufflinks now trembled with every shallow breath. Where are we going? He asked, his voice a rasp. Our spot, I replied softly. You remember. Where we used to watch the sunset. He turned his head slowly toward me. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. I took the final curve and pulled into the overlook. It was empty. Perfect. I cut the engine and let silence flood the space between us. The only sound was the gentle ticking of the engine cooling, and Dorian's ragged breath. I didn't want to die in a car, he muttered, barely audible. That makes 2 of us, I said. I looked at him, really looked. The man who had once knelt before me in the snow with a diamond ring. The man who made me believe in romance again after a brutal divorce. The man who whispered promises in bed and lies into my tea. The man who planned to kill me tonight. Why? I asked. Why any of it? His eyes fluttered open. You wouldn't understand. Try me. He coughed, dry, sharp. Because people like you never see it coming. People like me. Rich. Soft. Lonely. You collect things, houses, wines, gallery openings, but you never see the people around you. You mean people like you? He shook his head slowly. No. People like me survive. He was wrong. People like him hunted. But not anymore. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the USB drive I'd been carrying for weeks. I held it up, let the moonlight catch its polished surface. What's that? He croaked. Insurance. His eyes widened as he recognized the label. Those women, I whispered. Charlotte. Lydia. Margot. Did they beg you for their lives, Dorian? Did they realize too late who you were? He tried to sit up, but his body failed him. His muscles were stiff now, locked in place by the precise combination of extracts I'd spent months perfecting. I never hurt them, he gasped. No, I said. You just poisoned them. Gaslit them. Manipulated them. And when their accounts were drained and their wills signed, you let nature take its course. You didn't kill them, you let the poison do it for you. So poetic. You don't understand. I do, I cut in sharply. More than you think. I understand what it feels like to be watched. To be weighed. To be tested like a lab rat until your body turns against you. You made me doubt my own mind, my memory, my strength. He blinked rapidly, trying to clear the blur in his vision. I loved you. No, Dorian. You loved the game. I opened my clutch and pulled out the handwritten letter I'd penned 3 nights earlier. It was sealed, stamped, and addressed to Detective Inez Burrard of the Valmont Homicide Division. Inside it was a full confession. Not to a murder. But to my discoveries. To my fears. To the folder. The drawer. The wine. I placed it beside the USB. They'll find this when they investigate, I said. They'll find everything. And they'll know what you did. To me. To them. To all of us. His fingers twitched. His mouth worked silently, as if trying to shape a final plea. But I wasn't finished. I reached into the back seat and pulled out his phone, unlocked earlier while he was distracted during dinner. On it was his timeline. The one he created to track my decline. The dates he emailed to my doctor. The wine choice. The accidental death narrative he was setting up. I placed the phone beside the letter and USB. All your perfect planning, I whispered. Turned into evidence. He looked at me with something between hatred and awe. You're just like me, he rasped. I leaned in close so he could see the fire in my eyes. No, I said softly. I'm what you made me. And I'm the last lesson you'll ever learn. A long silence passed. Then his breathing slowed, becoming shallow. His pulse, faint. I stepped out of the car, stood by the overlook railing, and watched the sea crash against the cliffs below. Behind me, Dorian Moreau took his final breath. No fanfare. No drama. Just an ending. When I returned to the car, I slipped the USB into his jacket pocket. His phone into the console. I smeared his fingerprints across the wine glass again, just for good measure. Then I dialed. Emergency services, the dispatcher answered. My husband, I said, voice trembling. He's not breathing. I think something's wrong with the wine. We were at dinner. He didn't feel well. I drove us here to get some air. Please hurry. Yes, ma'am. Help is on the way. I hung up and leaned back in my seat, watching the distant lights of Valmont shimmer against the horizon. The trap was closed. The final act complete. And somewhere, maybe, the ghosts of 3 women were finally resting. By the time the police arrived, I had wrapped myself in a soft gray shawl and smeared my mascara just enough to look believable. Not hysterical. Not theatrical. Just devastated. The paramedics rushed to the passenger door and tried everything, but Dorian Moreau was already gone. I watched them work with an expression I had practiced in the mirror, the controlled grief of a woman blindsided by tragedy. A widow. A victim. A survivor. Detective Inez Burrard was the last to arrive. I'd done my research on her. Known she would be assigned to the case. She approached quietly, her eyes sharp and dark as slate, her trench coat damp with ocean spray. She didn't speak at first, just watched me as I sat near the overlook railing, sipping bottled water from a trembling hand. "Madame Moreau," she said softly, crouching down beside me, "I'm sorry for your loss. I know this is a difficult time, but may I ask you a few questions?" I nodded. "Of course. I'll do anything I can to help." She studied me. "Can you walk me through what happened tonight?" I took a shaky breath. We were celebrating our anniversary. 5 years. We had dinner at Aubert's Lumiere. Dorian brought the wine. It was a vintage he'd been saving. He poured it himself. After a while, he said he felt dizzy. We left early. "Why come here?" This was our spot. We used to come here to watch the sunset when we first started dating. He said he needed air. I didn't know what else to do. And then, he just... My voice broke. Detective Berard placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Thank you. I know this is hard." She stood and moved toward the vehicle. I watched as she leaned in, saw her note the wine bottle, the 2 glasses, one empty, one mostly full. Dorian's glass. My untouched one. She noticed the USB in his inner coat pocket and the sealed letter on the dashboard. Her expression changed almost imperceptibly. "Paramedics suspect a cardiac arrest," she said when she returned. "But of course, there will be toxicology testing. It's routine." I nodded. "Of course. Anything you need." The next few days were a whirlwind. I was questioned again, gently, at first. Then with more precision. I never lied. I simply let them discover the truth at the pace I had planned for them. I spoke of Dorian's generosity, our many vacations, the wine he'd been excited to open, and my mysterious illness over the past few months. They pulled medical records. They read the emails he'd sent my doctor. They saw the symptoms, the narrative he'd built. And then, slowly, the rest began to unravel. The letter I'd written detailed my suspicions. It mentioned the drawer I'd discovered. The photos. The fear. I didn't outright accuse him. I simply said I felt unsafe. That I was beginning to notice things. That if anything happened to me, it was not an accident. When they checked Dorian's computer, they found his timeline. Every symptom I had, he had logged. When they tested the wine bottle, they found trace amounts of a rare compound, a neurotoxin derived from foxglove and oleander. Untraceable in small doses. Lethal in accumulation. The official story began to take shape. Dorian Moreau, beloved property magnate, had a secret past. 3 previous wives, all deceased under suspicious circumstances. Charlotte. Lydia. Margot. All wealthy. All erased. In the weeks that followed, the media caught wind of the investigation. Headlines blared across France. Widow survives alleged poison plot. Millionaire's death linked to pattern of mysterious wives' deaths. Valmont's perfect husband, a killer in disguise. I became the reluctant center of a national drama. People called me brave. Survivors reached out. Victims' families sent letters. I stayed quiet, offered no interviews, and wore black for a full month. Detective Berard returned to my home in late July, this time not with suspicion, but with confirmation. "We exhumed Lydia Moreau's body," she said. "And Margot's." I offered her tea. She declined. Traces of similar toxins. "It's preliminary, but the case will be reopened. Charlotte's family has been contacted as well." I nodded. "There's more," she added, laying a few documents on the table. "Marriage licenses. Financial transactions. Patterns. He used different aliases. Different cities. Different signatures. But the same routine. 3 women, I said quietly. How long had he been doing this? We believe at least 12 years, she replied. Possibly longer. He was careful. Intelligent. Meticulous. So was I murmured. She looked at me then, not with suspicion, but with something else. Respect. If there's anything else you remember, she said, anything at all, call me. I didn't need to call her. She already had everything she needed. When she left, I went to my garden. It was overgrown now. Wild. Beautiful. Deadly. I pulled the gloves from the bench and began pruning the oleander first. 1 flower at a time. No longer needed for defense. But still, a reminder. A reminder that monsters sometimes were the faces of husbands. And survivors. Sometimes were pearls and smile through poison. The past, I discovered, doesn't rest easily. Not when it's been buried under layers of charm, lies, and the carefully curated life of a man like Dorian Moreau. In the weeks after his death, as investigators opened case files across 3 countries, the true magnitude of his manipulation began to unfold. He hadn't just killed for inheritance. He'd built an empire on it. A web of shell companies, offshore accounts, and forged legal documents, each designed to funnel assets from one wife to the next, until they disappeared. And now that empire was crumbling. It started with Lydia. Her brother contacted me through a journalist. He hadn't spoken to her in years. Dorian had slowly isolated her from her family, claiming they were toxic. The story was all too familiar. I didn't even know she was dead until 6 months after, he told me in a hushed phone call. He said it was sudden. That she wanted privacy. That she was buried in a private ceremony. I closed my eyes, nausea rising. That sounds like him. Her brother sent me copies of old voicemails, Lydia, full of joy, gushing about her new fiancé. And then a gap. Months of silence. A final voice message that was slurred, confused, and abruptly ended. Margot's sister emailed next. She'd been investigating on her own for years, but no one listened. He was so persuasive, she wrote. Even I believed his grief. Charlotte's niece found me on social media. She always seemed tired at the end, the girl typed. He said it was cancer, but she never told anyone. Their stories mirrored mine. Too much trust. Too many missed signs. All of them died thinking they were loved. I began compiling the evidence into a dossier. Names, dates, photos. Locations. Receipts. Emails. It was more than a closure project. It was a reckoning. Sandra, my private investigator, helped me organize everything. We worked late into the nights, piecing together the puzzle Dorian had spent a decade perfecting. He wasn't just a killer, she said, sliding a bank ledger toward me. He was an architect. This is the blueprint of someone who treated lives like steps in a business ladder. And I was supposed to be the last rung, I replied. She nodded. But you broke the cycle. Did I? Some days, I wondered. Especially when I opened the safe in my study and pulled out the notebook. The one where I documented everything. My symptoms. My observations. My staged decline. And the growing darkness inside me. Not just fear. Not just rage. But something else. Satisfaction. I hated that part. I hated how much I enjoyed watching his certainty unravel. How much I savored every stammer, every glance of confusion, every moment his perfect plan fell apart. It made me question who I'd become. Was I justice? Or simply the 4th wife who got lucky? One morning, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single photo. It showed Dorian in Venice, years earlier, standing beside another woman. Younger than me. Red hair. Pale skin. No name on the back. No date. Just a question mark, like an ellipsis that wouldn't end. I stared at the image for a long time. Could there be others? Had we uncovered the full list? Or was Dorian's darkness deeper than we knew? I added the photo to the folder. Days later, Detective Berard called. "We've issued warrants across 3 countries," she said. "Funds are being frozen. The families are being notified. The media will go public with everything next week." I thanked her. She paused. "You saved lives, Madame Moreau. Whether you know it or not." I hung up and stood by the window. The garden was in bloom again. White lilies. Pale foxglove. Beautiful, yes, but I would tear it all down soon. I needed to. I couldn't live among poisons anymore. Even the ones that had saved me. Later that week, the last of the exhumations were completed. Medical examiners confirmed it. All 3 women had traces of similar toxins. The files would be reopened as homicides. The cases were no longer cold. I attended a private memorial arranged by Lydia's family. They didn't know I was coming. When I introduced myself, her brother stared at me for a long time before pulling me into a tight embrace. "I wish she'd had your strength," he whispered. "No," I said softly. "I wish I'd had her warning." We cried together. Quietly. The way survivors do. 1 month later, I sat with Sandra in her office as we prepared the final brief for Interpol. He used his knowledge of psychology, finance, and law to create the perfect facade, she said. But he made one mistake. What? He assumed no one would ever fight back. She looked at me. "And you did." I nodded. But part of me didn't feel victorious. Just empty. Because the cost of revenge isn't just the act. It's the part of yourself you lose along the way. I'd won. But I wasn't the same. And I never would be. The hardest part about surviving isn't the victory. It's the silence that follows. The reporters eventually left. The neighbors stopped asking questions. Dorian's name faded from the front pages, replaced by newer scandals, newer tragedies. But the echo of what he did, of what I did, lingered in every corner of my estate like the scent of fading perfume. Unseen. But undeniable. I needed to leave. Not just Valmont. Not just the house with its heavy drapes and velvet memories. I needed to leave the version of Celine Moreau who had spent 6 months pretending to die, just to live. So I began my exit plan. It started, as always, with a list. I opened a new leather-bound journal, green, this time. Clean pages. No coded entries. No dosages. Just ink and intention. Step 1 * close everything tied to Dorian. Step 2 * liquidate all assets I could control. Step 3 * set up anonymous trust funds for the families of Lydia, Margot, and Charlotte. Step 4 * disappear. Sandra helped me transfer what remained of my wealth into newly created offshore accounts under my grandmother's maiden name. She'd done this before, for witnesses, for victims, for women who needed to vanish after surviving powerful men. "You'll need a new passport," she said, tapping her pen on her desk. "A clean exit point. Nice and quiet. I suggest Montenegro. Or Cyprus. Both have the kind of privacy you need." "What about the authorities?" "They've already concluded their investigation. The files are closed. You were the victim. You were nearly number 4. I was also the executioner. Sandra looked at me carefully. They'll never prove that. They don't want to. You gave them the evidence to close 3 cold cases. They won't look the gift horse in the mouth. But I know. You'll carry that, she said softly. We always carry it. But you'll also carry the fact that you stopped a predator. That matters more. I wasn't so sure. Guilt doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in through the cracks. In the quiet moments. In the way I flinched when someone poured me tea. In the way I studied people too closely. Measured their smiles. Their intentions. I was always searching now. Always analyzing. Always asking myself, could they be like him? Even the postman startled me sometimes. My trust had withered. Like the last frostbitten rose in my garden. I sold the estate under a trust-managed auction. The buyer was an art collector from Munich. Paid in full. Sight unseen. No questions asked. That was how I knew I'd done the paperwork correctly. The garden I burned. I dug up every flower bed. Removed every toxic root. Eleanor never asked why I stopped visiting. She probably assumed I'd found peace. I had. But not the kind she'd imagine. One night, a package arrived at my door. No return address. Inside, a notebook. A different one. Familiar handwriting. It was Dorian's. His original planning journal. His first victim, I realized, had never been Charlotte. It had been a woman named Annalise. No last name. No location. Just pages of notes, her habits, her medications, the moment she began to suspect. There was no record of her anywhere else. No marriage certificate. No obituary. She had simply vanished. And she had been pregnant. I stared at the ultrasound image tucked between the pages. Suddenly, the air left my lungs. This wasn't a game. Not a performance. It was a massacre stretched over a decade. A predator hiding in pressed suits and vintage wines. I scanned every page and forwarded it to Berard. The reply came an hour later. Thank you. We will pursue this. You've done more than anyone ever could. That night, I sat on the bare floor of my empty living room. My suitcase beside me. The air smelled like cedar polish and absence. The windows were open, and the wind carried distant laughter from the street below. I wasn't afraid anymore. But I wasn't healed either. I didn't think I ever would be. I stood slowly and walked to the mirror in the hallway. The woman who stared back was thinner. Paler. But sharper. Her eyes no longer searched for love. They searched for truth. For intent. For danger. She could see the cracks in a person. Because she had learned how to break without making a sound. I left Valmont on a cold Sunday morning before dawn. One suitcase. A fake passport. A pocket of names I'd never forget. The taxi driver didn't ask where I was going. He didn't need to know. Because even I didn't know. But wherever it was, it wouldn't be here. Not in this city of silk lies and scented poison. I didn't say goodbye. Not to the house. Not to the memories. Not to the man who tried to write my ending. Because the truth was, I'd already rewritten it. And the last chapter was mine. The sun over Montenegro was different. Not just in color or temperature, but in silence. It didn't know my story. It hadn't watched me perform grief. It hadn't seen my fingers tremble over a wine glass laced with death. This sun was clean. And for the first time in what felt like years, I stood beneath it without needing to fake a smile. My new name was Elodie Renault. French. Common. Unmemorable. I rented a modest villa nestled into the cliffs above the Adriatic, whitewashed walls, blue shutters, a garden of lavender and lemon trees. No foxglove. No oleander. Nothing to remind me of what had once bloomed under my hands. It was quiet. Too quiet. The first week, I didn't unpack. I lived out of my suitcase like I was still running. Still ready to vanish if a knock came at the door in the middle of the night. Even though the investigation was over. Even though I had been cleared, even praised, by the authorities. Even though Dorian's name had been reduced to an archived Wikipedia article flagged for suspicious edits. Even though the world had moved on, I hadn't. I couldn't. Until he showed up. Not Dorian, of course. But something close. He called himself Henrik Dupont. Handsome. Mid-40s. A travel photographer, supposedly. We met at the Sunday market. He bumped into me near a table of sun-dried tomatoes and apologized in impeccable French. His smile was warm. His posture relaxed. Too relaxed. I noticed the ring indentation on his finger. Old tan line, nearly gone. A recently shed marriage or a habit he'd abandoned. I smiled politely, thanked him, and left. But he found me again. 2 days later, at the seaside cafe I frequented. He claimed it was coincidence. Ordered black coffee. Asked about the book I was reading. Camus. Fitting. I answered in vague sentences, offered nothing personal. Still, he lingered. The next day, a bottle of Corsican wine appeared on my table, anonymous. The note tucked into the twine read. To new beginnings. H*****. I didn't drink it. But I took it home. I began watching him. Henrik stayed at a hotel nearby. Claimed he was working on a photo essay of Mediterranean ruins. But his camera wasn't weathered. His shoes were too polished. His background was too clean. No social media footprint prior to 18 months ago. That was my first red flag. Then came the second. I ran his passport number through a darknet contact of Sandra's. It bounced. Fake. He wasn't just charming. He was scripted. I started documenting him. A new notebook. No poison this time, just patterns. Encounters. Timing. Body language. Lies. I tracked the waitresses he flirted with, the local banker he called an old friend, the way he always asked others about their family estates. He was building a profile. Not for a book. For a victim. Me. At first, I felt panic rising, palms sweaty, breath short. But then, something else surfaced. Calm. Because this time, I wasn't the prey. I was the lesson he hadn't learned yet. And I'd been taught by the best. I invited him for lunch. On neutral ground, a bustling cafe with an open kitchen, 2 exits, and a direct view of the ocean. He arrived on time. Wore linen. Smelled like bergamot and effort. You look radiant today, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. Sunlight suits me, I replied. He asked me about my work. I told him I was retired. From what? Interiors, I said. But I'm done designing spaces for other people. These days, I only build things for myself. He smiled at that. I let him talk. About photography. About travel. About starting over. He asked what brought me to Montenegro. Closure, I said, holding his gaze. The waiter arrived with our drinks. Water for me. A local white wine for him. He offered to switch. Ladies first, he said. I smiled. I'm not drinking today. His smile tightened. One of the tells. We ate. Talked. And then, as he finished his glass, I leaned forward, slow and deliberate. I know what you're doing, Henrik. He blinked. I've seen your kind before, I continued. You smell loneliness. You find a name. You build a story. You enter quietly. But you leave with everything. He froze. A flicker of calculation beneath his expression. A twitch in his jaw. But I'm not your mark, I said. I'm your mirror. And you're standing in the last room you'll ever try to decorate. He looked around. Checked for exits. I suggest you leave Montenegro, I whispered, before the next glass isn't just wine. His face shifted. From charm to cold. The real man beneath. You think you're clever, he said quietly. I know I am, I replied. And dangerous. No, I said, leaning back. I've simply survived a man more dangerous than you could ever hope to be. He stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked away. I never saw him again. But I kept the bottle. And the notebook. Later that night, I sat on my balcony, moonlight catching the pearls at my neck, Dorian's final gift, the only thing I kept. Not as a keepsake. As a reminder. Because the game hadn't ended. It had evolved. And now, I was the one setting the rules. Henrik was lucky. He got a warning. The next one might not. Some stories don't end with a funeral. They end with a decision. I stood before the mirror in the small bedroom of my Montenegrin villa, brushing my fingers over the necklace around my throat. The pearls were perfectly round, impossibly smooth. A gift from Dorian. A bribe. A countdown. A relic. I had worn them on the night he tried to kill me. I wore them again the night I watched him die. Now, I was thinking of taking them off for the last time. But something stopped me. Not sentiment. Control. Because in a world where people like Dorian exist, men who study you like a puzzle and twist your love into a weapon, every small detail matters. Even a pearl. Even a pause. I stepped out onto the balcony, the Adriatic shimmering under the morning sun. Below, a new day unfolded with sleepy cafes opening, boats rocking in the bay, and an old woman sweeping her doorstep with the same tired rhythm as the day before. They had no idea who I used to be. No idea what I had survived. And I preferred it that way. Across the small marble table, a fresh envelope waited. My name, Elodie Renault, written in clean, feminine script. The postmark was from Geneva. Inside was a legal packet from my new identity broker, confirming the success of my complete erasure. Céline Moreau was dead. Legally. Publicly. Permanently. The world knew me as the grieving widow who escaped death and helped crack open an international fraud ring. The media had moved on, but online forums still shared theories. One blogger suggested I might have known more than I let on. Another believed I was the true mastermind. They weren't wrong. But they weren't right either. I wasn't the villain of Dorian's story. I was the rewrite. And now, I had to decide who I wanted to be in the next chapter. Sandra called that afternoon. She never used my new name over the phone. I thought you should know, she said. Interpol tracked another offshore account. He had a backup plan. Of course he did. They also found a fifth woman. Geneva. 2009, name was Simone Laurent. Vanished. No body. I wrote her name in my notebook, under Annalise. They'll close her case, too, she said. I hope they do. Silence. Then. Are you okay? No. Another pause. But I'm alive, I added. That's more than he expected. We ended the call. That evening, I dressed for dinner. Simple black dress. Hair pinned. No makeup. I tied the pearls at my throat and met my own eyes in the mirror. This time, I didn't flinch. I walked to the waterfront restaurant, nodding at the hostess, and chose a table in the corner, my favorite spot. I ordered wine, but only held the glass. I didn't drink. I watched the sea. And I waited. Not for anyone in particular. Just in case. Because I knew now, the world doesn't run out of men like Dorian. It only replaces them. The waiter brought a dessert, chocolate torte with raspberry coulis. Compliments of another guest, he said. I scanned the room. A man near the window raised his glass in a silent toast. He was younger. Softer features. A little too confident. I offered a cool smile and nodded once. Then I opened my clutch, pulled out my small notebook, and wrote. July 3rd. Man in navy suit. Blue watchband. Watch for patterns. It was second nature now. Not paranoia. Not fear. Preparation. Because the woman Dorian tried to kill. She was gone. But the one he created. She had become something else. Not a widow. Not a victim. A weapon. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had become the warning. And as I sat there, swirling wine I'd never drink, watching waves I no longer feared, I realized something important. The last pearl wasn't around my neck. It was inside me. The final, perfect artifact of a life that had been shattered and rebuilt, not with forgiveness, but with precision. And just like pearls, formed under pressure, shaped in silence, born in darkness, I had survived. I had hardened. And I would never be hunted again.